I reworked the premise into an emotional, family-centered story that keeps the title as a dramatic hook without turning it into an inappropriate relationship. Writing. The words hit so quietly that they barely sounded real. Take me somewhere private. For a second, my heart froze, not because I understood what they meant, but because I saw the fear behind them. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and realized they weren't asking for comfort, money, or forgiveness? They were simply begging for someone to listen before their world fell apart. If you had been standing there that afternoon, what would you have done? It happened in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, where life looked peaceful from the outside but carried invisible battles behind almost every front door. I had not spoken to my former girlfriend, Rachel, in nearly 2 years after our painful breakup. We had both moved on with our lives, or at least we pretended we had. One rainy Saturday, while shopping for groceries, I unexpectedly saw her mother, Margaret. She looked different from the woman I remembered. Her smile had faded, her shoulders were heavy, and her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent too many nights crying when no one was watching. She walked toward me with trembling hands and quietly whispered, "Take me somewhere private." There was nothing mysterious in her voice. It was the desperate plea of someone who had finally reached the end of carrying an unbearable weight alone. I drove her to a quiet public park overlooking a small lake where families usually gathered during summer afternoons. The rain had emptied the walking paths, leaving only the sound of water touching the shore. Sitting on a weathered wooden bench, Margaret finally released the tears she had been holding back. She explained that her husband had suffered a severe stroke months earlier. Medical bills had consumed nearly every dollar they had saved over decades of hard work. Rachel had moved across the country for a demanding job and barely knew how serious everything had become because Margaret refused to burden her daughter. Pride had become her prison. She had smiled through church services, grocery lines, and neighborhood conversations while silently wondering how she would keep the lights on next month. Listening to her reminded me that life has a strange way of erasing old resentments when real suffering appears. My breakup with Rachel had once felt like the greatest pain I would ever experience. Sitting beside her mother that afternoon, it suddenly seemed so small. Sometimes the people we think have hurt us are carrying wounds much deeper than we can imagine. Margaret admitted she had recognized me several weeks earlier but lacked the courage to approach me. That day, something inside her finally broke. She did not want money. She did not expect miracles. She only wanted one person outside her family to know the truth because keeping everything hidden had become heavier than the problems themselves. During the following weeks, I quietly began helping without expecting anything in return. I contacted local charities, spoke with neighbors, and organized volunteers from the community church to prepare meals and assist with transportation to medical appointments. I spent weekends repairing things around the house that had slowly fallen apart while Margaret focused entirely on caring for her husband. Every small improvement reminded me that kindness rarely arrives through grand gestures. More often, it arrives disguised as ordinary people showing up when everyone else has disappeared. Eventually Rachel learned what had been happening. She returned home carrying guilt that weighed on her heart far more than her luggage. She had believed her parents were managing because every phone call ended with her mother insisting everything was fine. When she walked into the hospital room and saw her father's condition with her own eyes, she realized how much had been hidden behind those reassuring words. Watching Rachel embrace her mother without saying a single sentence became one of the most emotional moments I had ever witnessed. Sometimes love speaks loudest through tears instead of words. Time slowly brought changes that no one believed possible during those darkest days. Margaret accepted help instead of refusing it. Rachel arranged to work remotely for several months so she could stay close to her parents. Neighbors who had barely exchanged greetings before suddenly became like extended family. The community raised enough money to ease the crushing medical expenses, and local volunteers continued supporting the family long after the headlines of generosity had faded. It reminded everyone that real compassion is not measured by one generous afternoon but by choosing to remain present when life continues to be difficult. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the Ohio sky with warm shades of orange and gold, Margaret thanked me for stopping that day in the grocery store parking lot. She admitted she almost turned around before speaking because she feared being judged or misunderstood. Instead, she found someone willing to listen. That single decision changed more lives than either of us could have imagined. It taught me that the most powerful act of kindness is often giving another person a safe place to tell the truth they have been hiding from the world. Months later, Margaret's husband slowly regained enough strength to walk short distances with assistance. Recovery remained difficult, but hope had returned to the family. The house no longer felt silent and defeated. Laughter occasionally echoed through the kitchen again. Holiday dinners became smaller than they once were, yet somehow they felt richer because every person around the table understood how close they had come to losing everything that truly mattered. Hardship had not destroyed them. It had stripped away pride, resentment, and unnecessary distractions until only love remained. As I drove home after visiting them one last time before moving to another city for work, I thought about that quiet whisper that had changed so many lives. It would have been easy to misunderstand those words or simply walk away. Instead, they became the beginning of healing, forgiveness, and a reminder that every stranger we meet may be fighting a battle we cannot see. Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who never ask for help, but the ones who finally find the courage to whisper that they cannot carry the burden alone anymore. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment when one small act of kindness changed someone's life forever? As the miles disappeared behind me, I realized the greatest gift we can give another human being is not wealth, advice, or perfect solutions. It is the willingness to stop, listen, and remind them they do not have to face their darkest days alone. Some whispers are not invitations into secrets. They are quiet cries for hope, and answering them with compassion can create second chances that echo for a lifetime. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe so more people can be reminded that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.